Comics. Comics.
Because they have no home.
Today is Doomsday, and I'm Joe Getcho.
And I'm Mike White, and this is the Clean Comic Book Podcast. We like comics because they have no hope for the future. I mean bones. Find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast, or in Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics
X.
1. And use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to join the conversation and share your thoughts.
That's right, and today's Boneless review is going to be about Fantastic Four, Books of Doom, written by Ed Brubaker, penciled by Pablo Romani, and published in 2007 by Marvel Comics.
That's right, and after listening to today's review, check out our after show on YouTube, where we'll discuss the writer and penciler, take you on an even deeper dive into Dr. Doom's backstory and history, and give a shout out to some listener comments from social media.
That's all I
wish
got.
I had a Doom figure.
That's all I got. I don't have a comic book or any of the Fantastic Four or anything, but I have this little tiny Doom figure that was left over, I think, from my wife's childhood, so yeah.
Yeah. I have the Books of Doom.
You have the Books of Doom. What's in the Books of Doom? Well, let's find out.
Let's find out.
So our story today is actually a retelling and expanded version of Dr. Doom's original origin story that was published in the pages of Fantastic Four Annual Number 2 in July 1964. Fun fact, it was actually Archie Comics that brought the concept of an annual magazine to the American comic book market when Archie Comics released its first annual comic book, titled appropriately enough Archie Annual Number 1, in 1949. At a time when comic books still cost 10 cents per issue, a 25-cent oversized annual magazine was a big deal. And if you haven't already, make sure you listen to our last episode where we talked about Archie Comics and in Archie vs. Predator. That was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Anyway, in our story today, Victor Von Doom remembers everything. Every moment, every pain, every betrayal. And in his own words, because this is his story, he's going to tell you exactly how he became Dr. Doom. But let's be clear, Doom controls the narrative here, so if anything sounds too convenient, too heroic, too perfect, well, that's probably by design. I'm going to try to make this a little theatrical, so bear with me here. Born into a wandering band of Latvian gypsies, Victor was the son of a healer and a sorceress. His mother, desperate for power, dabbled in dark magic and made a deal with a demon. The result? A vengeance spell gone horribly wrong. An entire village wiped off the map, including innocent children. Overcome with horror, she was struck down before she could undo it. The clan turned on Victor and his father, demanding exile, but even as a child, Victor had a way of making people listen. He told them in no uncertain terms, cast him out, and he would make them regret it. So they backed off. Doom's will has always been law. Outcast or not, Victor had one friend, Valeria. She saw him for who he was before the world did. But grief came knocking when the Baron's soldiers took his father to heal the Baron's dying wife. His father failed. So he was forced to flee with Victor and froze to death in the wilderness, leaving his son wrapped in his final gift, a jacket that couldn't keep out the cold. That was the moment Victor's obsession took root. Science wasn't enough. Magic wasn't enough. But together, they could crack open the universe itself. He devoured his mother's spellbooks, built bizarre devices beyond human comprehension, and by 16, he was running the Gypsy clan like a warlord. His inventions protected them, but this power had a price. His first kill was a soldier that haunted him. He wasn't a murderer, at least not yet. Then the Americans came calling. He got a scholarship, a ticket out, a way to push his mind even further, so he took it. But in the U.S., he met his greatest irritation. Reed Richards. Smug, brilliant, always a step ahead. Doom didn't tolerate rivals, and Reed was just that. But that wasn't what broke him. No, that honor goes to his own reckless genius. He built a machine to rip open the veil between life and death to bring back his mother. And it failed spectacularly. His face was scarred. His pain was endless. The demon was keeping his mother's soul and laughing. Expelled and blacklisted, a joke in the scientific community, Victor did what Doom always does, burned his past and walked into the unknown. His path led him to a hidden order of monks in the mountain of Tibet, the masters of the old ways, blending science and sorcery like no one else. He barely made it to their doorstep, surviving a Yeti attack before collapsing in the snow. They took him in, trained him, and 5 years later he had surpassed them all. And that's when Doom realized two things. The Baron who doomed his father was now king, and Reed Richards was being hailed as the world's smartest man. So he'd had enough. Victor cast off his old name. From now on, there was only Doom. And Doom doesn't wallow in pain, he weaponizes it. He built a suit of armor, cold and unyielding, to lock away every weakness, to silence the demon's whispers in his mind, to make sure that nothing, no blade, no fire, no doubt could ever touch him again. The transformation was complete, and he looked like this. If you can't see, if you're not watching on YouTube, I have a little Doom figure on my microphone just for fun. So his first stop was Latveria. He returned like an avenging storm, cutting through soldiers like they were made of paper. But Doom plays the long game. Instead of taking the throne by force, he made sure the people saw him as their savior. His clan, the ones who once feared him, were given a choice: loyalty or death. When a family friend refused, Doom killed him in cold blood and made the others bury him. So obviously, murder is no big deal at this point. His old friend Valeria saw what he had become, barely recognizing the boy she once loved. Before he sent her away, however, she left him with one final truth. He wasn't building a kingdom, he was building walls. The war for Latveria was a spectacle. Murder bots, horseback warriors, the whole medieval meets sci-fi battlefield. But the king was a coward. When Doom finally marched into the capital, the royal guards didn't even fight. They just stepped aside. The king ran to the cathedral, praying for salvation, but Doom was done waiting. He strangled the king to death with his own hands. And just like that, Latveria was his. The demon that held his mother's soul wasn't done with him, though. They made a deal. Once a year, Doom could fight for her freedom, but he would always lose. And each loss would make his people in Latveria despise him even more. It was a game he couldn't win, but he played it anyway, because Doom does not surrender, not even to fate. Cut to the present. The entire tale, the entire confession was just a Doombot. But a Doombot so perfect, so much like its creator, that even Doom himself refused to destroy it. Because this is the truth. Doom is more than a man. He's an idea, an inevitability, and he will never be undone. What, you expected a happy ending from the origin story of someone named Dr. Doom? Anyway, that's pretty much what you need to know for our story, so we'll take a quick break and come right back to discuss.
In those days, Latveria was ruled by a different tyrant, the Baron.
They have murdered my mother. And now they have killed my father. They will pay. All of mankind shall pay for this.
And so the legend of the strange young gypsy grew until his experiments ended abruptly.
What have I done to myself?
And so, Victor Von Doom hid from the world. Here he became Dr. Doom.
So we usually like to start off by talking about prior exposure to the character. I have a lot coming into this. As most people probably know by now, Fantastic Four is the Marvel comic that I'm the most well-read on. So given that Doom is their arch nemesis, I've read a lot of stories about Dr. Doom through the years. I think I actually started reading Fantastic Four regularly in like the mid to late 90s because I was getting Silver Surfer like direct through the mail. They were mailing it to my house every month. And Silver Surfer got canceled, and they were like, well, he's related to Fantastic Four, so to like fill out your year of subscription, we'll give you Fantastic Four issues. And then I started reading those, and I was like, this is cool. It's like sci-fi and you know, and they're sort of like adventurers and explorers, and I like their powers, and I sort of just fell in love with the comic book from there. So
Nice.
But one of the first sort of long story arcs of that period in time was written by Chris Claremont, who we know from our Rogue versus Miss Marvel episode.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually had a story where Reed was locked inside Doom's armor while Doom was deposed. And so to keep the world from like devolving into war, Reed had to basically pretend to be Doom for like a year. And so it starts making him go crazy, and there's like, you know, all this stuff with him being locked in the armor, and that sort of was my introduction to him. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, well, of course, mine is completely different than that. I was, sort of a late bloomer when it came to comic books. I didn't really get into like actual comics until like the 2000s. I mean, I had watched a lot of
Right.
like, cartoons, animation, so I was familiar with a lot of, comic book characters. So I think, Doctor Doom was just one of those that it was either in that really jazzy Fantastic Four game that we played, or in some of the comics I was reading for Spider-Man or something, but got into it kind of that way. So Doom's one of those characters that I know about because I've seen him in a lot of different things, but is not a character that I've really like delved into just that particular character. So this one is especially fun for me because I get to sort of see some of the nuance of his personality and kind of get to understand him as a character a little bit more, rather than seeing, what he does and the destruction that he brings, whether he's working with against the Fantastic Four or against the Avengers or, wherever he's at, but like to really see something that's personal to him. So, so this is definitely like a really, fun one to get into if you're not that familiar with the character. Giving a little bit away of the ending and maybe our ratings there, but just to, kind
Well,
of put that in perspective.
yeah, I mean, and this is, as far as I know, still kind of considered like the story Bible for his character. So coming into this period in comic book history, we'd had a couple different writers offer different takes. There
Mm-hmm.
was the idea that the mask was too hot when it was put on his face, so it actually like
Yeah.
melted onto his face. And then John Byrne in the 80s, I believe, had him pull off the mask at one point, and you find out that he just has this tiny scar, and he's like so vain that he doesn't want to show anybody that one scar, so that's why he covers up his face. and
Yeah.
and so that was his sort of like 1980s kind of like silly explanation. But I think that the modern era, for the most part, we go with his face is actually melted, and I don't think the mask is really, like, it could be removable, but it would be excruciatingly painful
Mm-hmm.
to take it off. So,
Yeah, because it was hot
but
when he
yeah,
put it on, so it burned him, but
right.
it kind of fused into him. Yeah, because I
Hmm.
did look at like do a little research on the differences between this kind of expanded origin and the original origin, and that was one of the
Hmm.
things where they kind of just gloss over it here in this retelling, but in the original, yeah, it's like it's hot, and he's like, well, the guys that are putting it on, like they have tongs, and they're like, it's too hot, master. We have to
Yeah.
wait, and he's like, no, Doom waits for no man. Pain is nothing to me,
Hmm.
and so they're like, okay, and they put it on his face, and yeah,
Yeah.
it probably
It
fused to his
just
face.
like pull it out of, yeah. So especially in that period in the 90s when I was reading, I remember anytime you see like through the slits for his eyes,
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of see the sort of like charred, gross skin underneath around his eyes.
Yeah.
And so that I think is pretty consistent with most artists in the way that they draw him now. So that seems to be kind of the version that they've run with. But
Well, and I wanted to bring up the Fantastic Four movie, the first one.
oh
Like
yeah.
that was one of the takeaways for me was, okay, so Doctor Doom is like this, pretty looking guy with a little scar, and
Hmm.
he wears a terrifying mask, and I'm just like, okay, why does he wear this mask? It's just part of his outfit or something. But I really like
Sure.
this origin story because it gives a reason for why he wears the mask
Hmm.
and why it's really a part of him, not just because, it's melted to his flesh, but it's like he really is building walls where he's like, I'm going to numb myself to the outside world and I'm just going to be cold. And so he's got this, metal mask on his face that's like, a barrier instead of like in the movie where I think he was there on the ship with them when the evil
Yeah.
energy, not evil energy, not gamma rays. Come on,
The cosmic
cosmic
radiation,
radiation. Yeah.
the cosmic rays. Yeah.
So the cosmic rays, he was there in the movie, and so I think
Hmm.
he was like wearing a helmet or something, and so they showed that like kind of made him look a little Like he sort of looked
His
like
skin actually starts to like
yeah, it
become
peels
metal.
off.
He has like metal under his skin. So
That was a very movie
that
thing to do.
movie, yeah, that movie came out right when Marvel, as a comic book company, was kind of going, we've kind of lost faith in the mainstream universe to sell. So we've got Ultimate Spider-Man out here. That's doing really well with Bendis and Bagley. And so we're going to do another one. Ultimate X-Men has done well too. So we're going to do Ultimate Fantastic Four. And in that, the story was that they actually, Reed discovers the negative zone before anybody else is. He's like a teenager and he's part of like this think tank. And Victor Von Doom is also part of that think tank.
Of course.
And so in that story, they transport themselves to the negative zone and they all become changed. And Doom does, in fact, get metal skin.
Okay.
But so they did actually kind of pull from comics, just not like the main 616 universe. The thing about him being like a businessman that was kind of pushed out of his own company was stupid. That's nowhere in any of the comics. So
or
it kinda,
Reed being like super poor because he's really smart
yeah.
and he can invent new inventions that the world's never heard of, but apparently he doesn't know how to market himself. That's his weakness.
So that's a bit of a hard sell as well, because in the comics it's like he has so many patents that like they're never gonna be poor. Basically, there was a writer that tried to explore that story in the Marvel Knights 4 series, where he was like, well, what if they were poor, and what if somebody else got control of his patents, but he had to spin it towards the end as Reed was just experimenting to see if they could live a normal life or something, because the fans immediately were like, this makes no sense. Why are you doing this? It makes there's no logic there. So yeah, I mean, those are ideas that some writers have played with, but they kind of, the problem I see with the Fantastic Four movie, and we don't have to talk about it a whole lot, but they kind of were cannibalizing their own movies at that point. So we'd already seen the chairman of the board get ousted in Spider-Man, and that was their origin for Norman Osborn. And then they basically did the exact same thing to introduce Doctor Doom. By the same token, the second Fantastic Four movie has a very embarrassing dance scene with Mr. Fantastic, which kind of mirrors Spider-Man 3's very embarrassing jazz dance scene that had come out like a year earlier. So yeah, exactly. So Marvel was kind of, taking ideas from their own movies and just rehashing them, which was kind of a shame.
Yeah.
I think Julian McMahon maybe could have played him well, but the script was not good. So particularly for that character. So yeah, I mean, this book is a lot of the reason why I was disappointed, honestly, when I saw the movie, because I'm like, there's so much depth to his character. Like his mother, was she was trying to protect them, and so of course she held court with demons and she killed a whole bunch of soldiers. But then like the firstborn child of everybody in their tribe was killed as well or something. And so there's just like all this dark stuff happening in Eastern Europe before he even meets the Fantastic Four. Like you almost need a movie just for him to set him up, because there's so much story.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like this, and I guess both the original Origin too, we're relying on Doom is the one who's telling the story. And as we read the comic, Doom is actually there in his present form. Well, the Doombot, I guess, technically. As he's narrating as if he's in the scene. And it's really interesting because there's certain like scene or certain panels that Doom is in as he's narrating. And I kind of wondered, like, I didn't look at each one, but I kind of wondered if these were like really important moments for him, or if that was the writer artist saying, these are the ones where he's telling the truth, or these are the ones where he's lying, where you like see him show up. Like like this is almost like there's so much depth to it that you could do studies like that of like, just kind of understanding his character and like where he's narrating, where he's actually embellishing or not. Because the whole thing could be completely fabricated and it could be completely not even true. But, most stories like this have some element of truth to them. So I would imagine that it's like maybe a little bit embellished, or maybe some of the parts of insanity are a little downplayed. Like, you know, he's like, I had this huge regret for killing that soldier. Like, I can't believe what I just did. But he probably didn't lean into his feelings right before that, where he was just like, he probably got angry and felt like the pain and anger of the universe and took it out on the soldier. And then he felt, you know, remorse later. But in that moment, you know, and then that's sort of like what he harnesses later is he forgets about remorse, and he like puts on armor to protect him from ever feeling guilty again. Because I'm not Victor. I'm not some human that could, you know, kill another human, or that could break the law or do whatever. I am Doom. I am, you know, and it's like when he puts on the mask, it's not an alter ego. Like a lot of superheroes, really,
he
when
becomes that.
Yeah. But it's like, that's him all the time. He has no secret identity because he only has a single identity, and that's Doom. The other one, it's like he killed his secret identity alter ego. Like, Victor's gone.
Yeah.
I am Doom.
He really is. And one of the things I really like about the story is that you sort of see how that slow, gradual descent happens, because you start out and he does have connections to other people. And like, you know, at first his mother, obviously he loved his mother. And then, you know, his father was the only one that he was left with. Well, his father froze to death, but also his father was like not willing to talk about, you know, his wife after she passed because of all the like horrible stuff that went on.
Well, they wanted to keep Victor from it. Like, we don't want you to be like her, so we want to just forget about all that witchcraft stuff.
But he was kind of already set on the path when he was like, they were like mocking her at the funeral, and they were like, you guys can't stay. Like, you have to leave our tribe, because like we can't have you guys in here, because we just had a lot of people die, and now the military of this country is basically after us because we killed a whole bunch of their soldiers. So, but Doom was like, I can promise you, if you cast us out, that I'll become worse than my mother ever was, and I'll hunt down every one of you. And he's like 7 or 8 years old at this time, and they're just like, what?
I was like, too, you know, reading it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's just like, oh my gosh. So already he was kind of just like, no, like I don't just accept what life gives me. Like, I'm gonna basically like force life into what I want it to be, and by any means necessary. And that's kind of what he did ultimately.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your comment on the unreliable narration. The one thing that sort of offsets that, besides sort of seeing the asides, is often we'll have an aside with him standing there, but then it will go to the reporter talking to like an eyewitness that's in Latverian jail.
Yeah. And
he'll be like, I'll tell you exactly what Doom said. Because Doom is like, what I said as a child wasn't important. And then you go to this other guy, Boris, and he's like, no, I'll tell you what he said. And it was like, it chilled all of us to the bone. And we were just like, all right, we're not going to challenge this kid anymore. So I think that enough of it can be verified by those eyewitness accounts, even though the person being told the story doesn't escape alive. Yeah. Us as the audience get the benefit of seeing Doom's perspective, and then also like, here's maybe somebody that was a bystander that was kind of there too. So
yeah, you get that,
I think
like,
that makes
sort
it a
of
little bit better.
Yeah, you get that additional perspective, and it serves as like confirmation of, you know, like, obviously something really bad took place here. But, you know, as far as like Doom himself and his, like, what motivates him, like, that's really what's in his narrative part, as he kind of explains, like, you know, I turned to technology because, you know, I was able to invent things that kept our, you know, tribe safe. And then, you know, until technology really wasn't enough. So then he was like working with magic, because, you know, that's how his mother is, you know, captured by this demon. It was through the occult. So he studies that too. And then it's interesting because he does this like fusion of magic and technology. And he's doing it externally through, you know, his various research and his inventions and things like that. But it's like he's kind of doing it internally as well, where it's like he's forging hard, cold steel with, you know, deep introspection and mysteries of the universe. And he's kind of like, as he's creating a way to go find his mother, he's almost symbolically and literally creating his own, identity as well. But
Oh,
the
yeah.
driving factor there the whole time is he's going to rescue his mother from this demon, and that's just how it's going to be. But then he realizes
Right.
his own feelings and his own, guilt and remorse and things like that. They just slow him down. Like, these things don't help me. So in the ultimate act of compartmentalization, he doesn't just say, I'm going to put these feelings aside and not think about them. He says, I'm cutting these feelings off. They don't exist because that person is gone. And it's like he forges ahead, and he's like, then he can be that sort of like brilliant tactician that's like, yeah, I could just go to the cathedral and stomp out the king and take over. Yay, me. But I need people on my side, and I need them to see me as the solution. So that way, when I take over, everybody's like, oh, yeah. It's kind of like Emperor Palpatine, where it's like,
Yeah.
we need to give this guy emergency power. And he's like, oh, me? Emergency power? Well, I mean, of course I'll give it back once the crisis is over. No problem. And then, of course, as soon as he has it, it's like, then the real face comes out, and he's like,
Yeah.
execute order 66, and that whole thing. So it's kind of similar, I think, with Doom, where it's like he's channeled all of his rage and his anger. He's not just an uncontrollable berserker, but he has that same sort of drive and rage, but it's very like disciplined and focused.
It's very focused. Yeah, he's very like whatever he sets his mind to doing, he's going to do it with no no thought to what the cost of it is, no anything like that.
Personal or otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a personal cost, no big deal. One of the first times that we really get into that sort of locking away of emotion, I remember they showed one of his college moments where he decided to go party, and of course they showed Ben Grimm was sort of like the big football star, and all the women were hanging off of him and stuff, and I was like, okay, I get that, that all kind of tracks with what time period they're showing. But then there was a woman that came up to him that was like interested, and as she was kissing him, he realized like, oh, this weakens me. And so he starts strangling her there on the college campus, because he's like, well, you're making me weak by basically making me feel good or whatever, and I need to get rid of weakness. And so he didn't kill her, but it was enough that like everybody kind of gave him a wide berth from then. And it was interesting how they had his reason for being there be like, well, the government finds out he's a genius, so they're like, well, we want you to make weapons and stuff for us. And so he's there on campus, and that's actually what saved him from being expelled for that incident too, because the government's like, well, he's still giving us things that we want, so we're just going to leave him there and let him keep doing his science thing, when of course he was actually also working on a machine to contact the afterlife, but they didn't know that at the time.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like so he meets Reed Richards, and that sort of rivalry starts. But it's interesting because there's a part where Reed is like looking at Doom's notes or something, and he's like, your equations don't make sense. And that's kind of one of those moments where it's like, okay, is that actually what happened? Or is that Doom's remembrance of what happened? Like, oh, stupid Richards was looking at my notes, and of course his little peon brain couldn't possibly comprehend my equations. But I, like, Reed actually probably looked at it and said, hey, there's something in here that doesn't look right. Like, you're doing something weird, and this is really dangerous, and if you don't stop, something bad could happen. And so, of course, Doom doesn't hear that at all. He hears, tiny peon man going, blah, blah, blah. And so he proceeds anyway, and then what happens? It blows up in his face. So I think that's where we get the like hero versus villain, where it's like Doom is just so blinded by his rage, but he thinks he's in control. Whereas so he can't see his blind spots, whereas Reed is just like, hey man, I don't think this is going to work.
Well, so there's a couple ways to look at that moment, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. You can read it as Reed probably did notice a problem with his equations. When it comes to purely science, Reed will beat him every time. However, Doom was probably combining magic at that point.
True.
So there might have been some symbols and things in there that were not mathematical, but that were like occult.
Yeah.
And Reed can't really understand or account for that part because, as stupid as it seems, with him existing in the Marvel Universe, most of the time he's like, well, magic is just science that I don't understand yet. I don't really believe in magic. So even though there's a Sorcerer Supreme, even though there's all these magical realms that totally exist in the Marvel Universe, Reed is very much like, no, I believe in science. And there's actually a later story where he's trying to fight back against Doom using magic. And Doctor Strange gives him an artifact. He's like, this will give you an edge, but there's a cost every time you use it. And Reed's like, oh, so it's like an equation. You do this and it costs this. So it's science. And he's trying to make it like work in his sort of logical brain. And so it's possible that there was a problem with Doom's equations because Reed was smarter. It's also possible that Doom was just doing stuff with magic that Reed didn't understand because that's not his field.
Yeah.
So
he could
I kind of like how that can play either way.
Right. Like he could put E equals MC squared times Ankh, and Reed's going to be like, why'd you draw an Ankh there? That makes no sense. And
right.
Doom's like, well, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you just take the Ankh and you do this magical thing, and then there's sparkles fly, or whatever. But like,
sparkles fly.
I don't know. I was thinking of like a cheap magician, I guess, instead of like a serious.
Sparkles. Those aren't sparkles. Those are flames.
I don't know. I don't practice magic, so I don't know. But like, yeah, I see.
He gets to where his mother is in hell, and he's the demon shooting sparkles at him.
Hey, a good distraction goes a long way. Like, ooh, the demon's just like, I will kill you, and then he's like, ooh, glitter, ooh, shiny. Shiny is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing, I was rereading just little snippets of the story today because it had been a couple weeks since we went over it last time. And not only does the suit wall him off from his emotions and from his old self, but he was actually having nightmares every night of the demon torturing his mother.
Yeah.
And he found ways to put enchantments on the armor that would actually be a barrier against that. So he's literally keeping the demon out as well with his armor. So,
right.
And the mask, being part of that. So this is the only story where I've read that before, but I like the idea that he's like, so yeah, I can mess with this stuff and I can keep it from sort of smacking back at me as well. Because that's always the downside of like using magic, right? Is there's always a cost.
Mm-hmm.
There's always like some horrible, price to pay. And I mean, if we ever look at any Hellblazer or John Constantine comics, like that's a huge theme that they deal with in those comics as well, is that like he might save somebody, but something really horrible happens usually as a result. So
yeah, I think that's something I could have maybe used more of, is like showing that the suit is magical. Like if in The Mask, like the movie with Jim Carrey, he's holding the wooden mask, and when he like tilts it, there's this little like glare that goes across it, and you see this kind of like green shimmery effect to show that it's a magical artifact. And I think like we see a lot of him forging and creating the armor out of metal and stuff like that, but I would have maybe wanted to see a little bit more of like, okay, so we create the armor, but then we enchant it magically with either some runes or with some actual magic spells, and then when Doom puts it on his face, there's this big bright light as it shuts out the demon realm when he's got it on. It's kind of like Magneto's helmet that keeps Cerebro out, that kind of thing. But it's a mystical, it's like a practical physical object that's been enchanted with mystical properties. So I think I would have wanted to see like some more runes or symbols or something going on when he's putting this on, because I've always focused on the armor as in, he just made this steel mask and put it on his face because he's a weirdo, and he's into like science and stuff and magic, and maybe he uses the magic to fly, and he uses the science to shoot lasers from his arm, and that's kind of two-dimensional. Like I think this is really like with the blending of the two, it's like you really see him like with that goal in mind of rescuing his mother. It gives him a reason to go into that realm, whereas Reed doesn't really have that. He has no reason to mess with this, magic crap.
No, he really doesn't. Reed is really the true sort of. I mean, he's almost like the Star Trek ideal of like the evolved human that is wants to use his intellect for good and to better himself and better
Yeah.
humanity, and like that's really what drives him. Like he wants to make the world and the universe a better place, and he's like, well, I have the responsibility of this intelligence, so I have to use it, and that's really what drives him. That and then when Sue and Ben and Johnny bring him back down to earth and go, hey, like, and also remember you have a family sometimes too. He's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, and but so he can be kind of cold sometimes, but not. Doom is cold in a way of like you can't reach him at all, whereas Reed it can be reasoned with,
Right.
like you can talk to him and reason with him. Doom is, I mean, his will
Well,
is absolute, and he's gonna
yeah.
do what he's gonna do.
What he says is law. Well, it's
Yeah.
like you can almost see Doom's pain and grief that has shaped his personality on the outside because
Oh,
of
yeah.
how he looks. And it's interesting because it's like he's not a subtle villain. He's not one that
No.
like you're gonna meet him in an alleyway and not realize that he's a villain at first because he's gonna sweet talk you. It's like Doom is Doom, and when you see Doom, it's Doom, and you'll be hurting all too soon. Like it's not a good thing.
No. No, I mean, he builds up such a reputation throughout the Marvel universe that, well, you've read the Invincible, is it Infamous Iron Man? I can't
Yeah.
remember. Infamous Iron Man,
Infamous.
where he actually, took on the Iron Man identity for a while. And the other people in the villain community are like, I ain't going near that guy. Like, I don't, because they know him as Doom, and they're like, I'm not gonna mess with whatever he's doing. Like, sure, you say you want to rescue people, all right, I'll get out of your way, because nobody really wants to challenge him, even within the villain community. I think partially it's just his single-mindedness drives him to go further than a lot of other villains or characters are willing to go. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff that he's done in the comics is really dark. As far as trying to get back at the FF, we talk about it in the after show a little bit, but one of the things that he decided at one point, like, you know what? I've realized my ego is the problem. My ego about thinking I can be better at science than Reed. So I'm just going to go pure magic. And that's what I'm going to fight Reed with because he doesn't understand it. So he uses their daughter as a familiar. And so while she's a baby, she's like spelling out the word doom with her blocks and stuff
Oh my
because
gosh.
he's like actually like casting black magic through her to like get into the
Yikes.
Baxter building from like halfway across the world. Yeah, he sends Franklin to hell. Like he does all kinds of like horrible things. Um because he's just like I have to be the best. Like I have to be the greatest. And that's Reed is really the only person on Earth that sort of challenges that notion of his that he's better than everyone else because time and again he keeps beating him. And so it's like it goes from just I blame you for screwing up the experiment with my mother to like you're infuriating and I have to destroy
Yeah.
you because you just keep humiliating me every time you appear and no one is allowed to do that to Doom because Doom is, he's
Yeah.
not a person, he's the absolute ruler of humanity. So yeah,
Well,
it's there's a
and
lot going on there.
saying that Reed is the smartest man in the world. Like Doom
Sure.
feels like it's his obligation to point out that actually that fact is not entirely correct.
Right.
So it's like you have that rivalry, but then it's also kind of like, well, taking personal stuff aside, I mean, technically he's still not the smartest man. So, it's kind of like
Right.
Doom is really good at justifying his actions into what he wants to do. Like he will
Sure.
make it work. And I think that's definitely like one of maybe his actual superpowers is just like
Yeah.
being super brilliant, but also being super brilliant in a way that it's like you can strip away the layers of your own personality and, put stuff where you want it to go. And it's like he has
Yeah.
this huge, it's like control. But, it's those times where he feels out of control, like probably when Reed defeats him. It's just like kind of like Negaduck again in Darkwing Duck, where it's like, I had this beautiful plan. I had it all laid out and it was really smart. And then, Darkwing comes along and he's just a bumbling idiot, but he wins. At least Reed is, one of the smartest men alive. So it's got to be a little bit like, hey, he beat me this time. Okay, I'll give him that one. I'll try it again.
Sure.
No, he's just like, I will get you, Richards. I will possess your children with blood magic.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, it's
Like
like it seems like every time he comes back, it's like a little bit worse than the previous time. Like it's just he has to keep reaching for the stars essentially, because he's really convinced at his core that humanity itself will be better if he's in charge. Like the universe itself will be better if he's in charge. He really does believe that it's not his own ego if it's true that he's like the most competent person basically. And so I think that's how he like justifies it, and he goes, but I am the most competent person, so everyone should just bow down to me because that's the way it is.
It only makes sense.
And so yeah, that it has to like really strike a nerve whenever he gets defeated by this like science nerd guy with lame stretchy powers. That's just like who are you? You're just this amorphous blob man basically.
Can you stretch
really
any part of
smart.
your body? So in the Fantastic Four book we read last time.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we made some references to the movie like that, where we're just kind of like some of the silly things that they took, like sort of what's inherently kind of funny about the Fantastic Four and stretched it and made it go a little too far. Like, what happens when rubber is super cooled and then something science like
the science in the movie was bad though. I
was gonna say I think some of it wasn't true.
Yeah, I've researched some of that online, and people are like, no, when you super cool rubber, it just cracks. So he should have just like broken into pieces. Like but he's not actually rubber, so that doesn't make sense anyway.
It doesn't even work.
Anyway, that movie is whatever.
Yeah. I would really like to see, like you said, like a Doom solo movie that, or a show or something that really is like it goes into the depths of his personality. Because one thing I really like about what they've done in Daredevil Born Again, the TV show, is that we've got Wilson Fisk and we've got Matt Murdock, and it's like they're both trying to be good guys, but they're trying to be good guys in a way that is contradictory to their own selves. So it's like they're trying to be somebody else for whatever reasons. And it's really cool to watch the sort of like psychology unravel of they're trying to be something they're not. And there's like a turning point where I just can't be that anymore. Or something comes up like, so I'm not going to give any spoilers or anything, but Fisk is running for mayor. We see that at the end of Echo.
Yeah.
So as mayor, it's like he's got to deal with like kissing babies and taking photos with dogs and, all this crap that he's just like, we don't have time for this. And, but when it comes to like running an empire, when it comes to, things like that, he's like, this is where I excel, manipulating people, finding their weakness and then just squeezing it so that way they do what I want to do. That's what I'm good at. And I can do that here in this arena. So it's like they sort of like try to be something else. And I would like to see, a story with Dr. Doom where we do that in a movie where it's like we really get inside his head and it's less about the, superhero stuff and less about the theatrics and more just about like this, where we see how he clearly internalizes things and writes them in his internal monologue in a specific way that works for him. But, he doesn't have to react to these situations the way that he does, but he thinks that he does have to. Like it's not like logic, but it's like it just makes sense. Like, hey, I felt bad about this, and so I realized that feeling bad was a weakness, so I had to get rid of that weakness. So now I don't feel bad anymore because I got rid of it by, murdering someone or putting a mask on my face that melted my flesh or, something. But it's a small
Yeah.
price to pay for inner peace. It's like he's got inner peace, but it comes at a cost.
Right.
And that's kind of like what we see dark magic. Like that's what it is. It's like you can
Yeah.
get some really great stuff with dark magic, but there's a cost that's, worse than, the benefit that you get from it. Like, I want to be rich. Okay, here you go. You got lots of money, but that's like all you get,
Right.
and everybody else around you is gone, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
so seeing a Book of Doom, show, I think would be awesome.
There's a lot there. There's definitely enough to explore with his character. I mean, even the first issue where they were showing his childhood, I was reading it and I was like, I'm into this. Like I'm invested in what's going to happen and seeing sort of how he moves from this to eventually going to the States and meeting Reed and then you almost feel an odd sense of comeuppance when he comes back to Latveria and kills the Baron because the Baron had been mistreating
He was a
his
bad
people.
guy.
Like he had been really mistreating them for like years and years and years. And Doom built himself into this unstoppable force and came back and people were like, "Well, you don't have an army. What are you going to do?" He's like, "Oh, I have all these Doom bots. It's fine." And yeah, instead of just going directly to him, it was like you said, like they got into his head a little bit and he was sort of explaining to the audience, at least in the comic, that like I knew that I needed the people to see me be victorious. So I was gonna march through the entire city and defeat their entire army and, show how worthless and pathetic they were, basically. And that, they did get to the point where I think people at first at least were like, well, yeah, Victor Von Doom is better because at least he's going to liberate us from this dictator that's been ruling over us.
Well, that was his
time.
reputation. Like he was protecting his gypsy clan for a while before he went to the States. So he had already risen to like a leadership role and shown that he could protect the people. So if those stories went to other people, oh, it's that Doom guy. Oh yeah, I heard about him.
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one that was like a real thorn in, the Baron's side? Like, yeah, we'll root for him. And I think that really distinguishes Doom as a sophisticated villain. Like, he's not just a villain.
Yeah.
He's not just, oh, I'm evil, twirl my mustache. But he's very sophisticated. He's very layered. He's definitely a bad guy. He is not an anti-hero.
Yes. Yeah, he's definitely a bad
it's like
guy.
he's an anti-hero for his own personal life. But anything that's outside of his own personal life, then, yeah, he's a villain. Because when it comes to Latveria, I mean, he does care about them, right? It's like he may rule them with an iron fist, and he may treat them poorly, but
they don't. It's interesting. It's like you can't really question him. I wouldn't be putting up anti-Doom posters around the country because that would be a good way to get killed, I would think. But at the same time, they usually portray it that the people there don't really want for anything either. So they're, as long as they have, or he has their like absolute loyalty, he provides everything for them. Like they can work, but I don't think they really have to. Like they're all pretty much just taken care of. So he has kind of cordoned off this little society that he's like, this is my little utopia. And they've even tried at various times throughout the comics to like depose him. In fact, one of the books that you gave me, oh gosh, it was a few years ago, The Overthrow of Doom. It's from like around Fantastic Four 192 to 200. There's a period where they team up with Zorba, who's like a Latvian revolutionary, to sort of topple Doom from the kingdom. But what always ends up happening is that whoever gets installed there in his place just turns into something worse than like what Doom was. So it almost seems like he has to be in place as the ruler there because the country always seems to descend into chaos whenever he's not in charge. So and there's a lot of the people that, while many of them do hate him, there's a sizable group too that are like, no, it was much worse before him. So like let's just tell him that we love him as our king and everything will go great for us. So some of them are scared, some of them are like, we're actually loyal, and some of them are like, well, our lives are better than they were, so just don't question it, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like, do you want to live under, oppression and control and dictator, or do you want to have freedom, except everybody has freedom, so now the gangs and the
Right.
people taking advantage and the corrupt people, at lower levels and things like that. Do you want to deal with them? So it's like, not really lesser of two evils. It's just like at least, at least you're not afraid of someone breaking into your house in the middle of the night
No.
when Victor Von Doom is in charge. You know what? At least you can sleep peacefully at night. Your day might suck and be cold and oppressive, but hey, at least you might have to suck up
You may
a little
not be
bit
allowed to leave the country, but
yeah, but it's okay because at least with Doom, we don't have to deal with whatever we had to deal with under Baron von Schmucker, whatever his name was, I forget. But
Baron von Schmucker instead of von Strucker. Strucker is the Captain America villain, I think.
I think that's probably what I was trying to think.
Yeah. That's funny.
But yeah, so I think overall, it was a really interesting story to read. Like when I started reading it, I was kind of like, I'm not sure what I'm in for here. It seems very kind of like melodramatic, and we'll see. But I think any melodrama in there was really intentional because it was designed to show what Doom went through and how he sort of not necessarily rewrote his history, but how he definitely controlled it. Like he was in control. He was deciding what was right. He just knew what to do, and made these decisions. And it only makes sense that he got to the place that he did by the end. Although did it because it was a Doombot. So how exactly true is it? Because now it's like that for me introduced another layer of confusion, because it's like, okay, we've got a guy telling his own origin who is a megalomaniac. So we know right away that there might be some bending of truth. We have some eyewitness testimony, so that helps with the validity.
Sure.
But then we have these Doombots, and it's like, well, did the Doombots, fabricate the interviews? Were they real interviews? Were they prisoners? And they were told, this is what you will say on camera. I mean, there's so many unknowns by the end that I'm like,
there are.
Well, does the story even matter? Is it even partly true at all? Is it just a fun what if, or is it his actual true origin story? And maybe that's the point, so you don't really know.
A lot of it has been corroborated by other existing material.
Okay.
So at this point in the comics, is this 2007? Somewhere in there. So Mark Waid, I believe, was writing Fantastic Four at this time. He actually introduced the character of Valeria. And so but in her introduction, he was like, basically, big reveal, Doom did have a love of his life. And then in that same issue that they introduce her, Doom kills her and uses her skin for his new pure magic suit. So he sacrifices her to demons and use it. It's really gross. Anyway,
yikes.
That's how he. So the issue that she was introduced in, she's also killed in. So Valeria does not have a happy ending for her character. Although when they show her during Mark Waid's run, she's really old. So it seems like they, all this stuff where they were in love when they were younger and all that. That part at least is true. There are also other Fantastic Four stories where there's different versions of how did he get the mask. But mostly that seems like it's true too. So really the stuff that's suspect is his own perspective, or when he's like, well, my rivalry with Reed Richards has been played up over the years. It's not really that big of a deal, or some of those things where it's like, no, I think it kind of makes you insane, actually.
It affects you more than you let on. Yeah, he's like, I'm cold and it doesn't bother me, but it
he's installed Doombots before to rule the country while he's not there, that are exact replicas of his personality and everything, so that nobody would know that he's gone. And there's one point where he clones himself and has his clone take the throne. His clone's name is Christoph, I think. He finally gets his own name, Christoph Bernhard or something like that. But yeah, he is able to transplant his personality into something else. So that part is something that at least he's demonstrated he knows how to do.
Well, it's like he has so much ego that it like overflows, and he has to have
Hmm.
a container for the overflow. So
Exactly.
so it's like there needs to be more of me. There shouldn't be just one Well, there's one Von Doom, but there'll be. I
Right.
will name this Christoph. It's a copy of me, not as
Yeah.
good. Your name is Christoph, but I'm Victor Von Doom. I have your memories. No, you are Christoph.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is when they actually think that they're him or something. And
Yeah.
there's so many times too that the FF have been like, "We finally defeated him," and then like his head rolls off and there's like circuits and they're like, "Oh man, it wasn't actually him after
Sounds
all."
like Scooby
So,
Doo, where they like have the reveal at the end. Let's
yeah,
find out who is wearing the ghost mask. Oh no,
right.
it's the gym teacher. Ah!
It's Old Man Withers from the arcade. It's
But
I
you're the one that
don't
called
know.
us to investigate this mystery. Why?
Right.
Why did you do it? Yeah. No, we didn't
Yeah.
get Doom. Ah,
Yeah,
Von
so
Doom.
he's always kind of he
One
keeps getting
step ahead.
defeated, but he's still one step ahead as well. Um, so I don't know. The twist at the end, it felt like there's a Edgar Allan Poe story, Cask of Amontillado, where this guy is basically getting walled up as he's speaking. And then he's enclosed in a wall at the end of the story. That
Oh.
kind of felt like the inspiration here for like, yeah, we'll give you all the information about Doom, but you're never gonna see the light of day again. Like you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So be happy that you have all this information, but yeah, you'll be. I don't know if he killed the reporter. I don't know if he just locked her away forever. But either way, we're never gonna see her again.
Yeah.
So
I think
that
that
felt
was
very in keeping with his character.
I think that was good though from a storytelling perspective
Yeah.
because that way the information that we have it because we're the reader, we're the audience, but
Right.
that information is not available to the other characters that we meet. So now no one will ever know, everything that Doom went through, so they won't know him like we do. So when we're seeing stuff on the page, we're like, well, okay, I get why Doom is doing this. Whereas Reed is going
Sure.
to be like, what the heck, man? Why why are you doing that? So it'll make a little more sense to us as the reader. So I
Yeah.
thought that was good, but the whole like Doombot thing and just that was a little too much questioning for me. But it sounds
Yeah.
like that actually fits just fine within because
It's
if he doesn't want people to know he's gone, and this Doombot is one in particular that he's like that one's really like me. I'm gonna
mhm.
leave it in charge of Latveria while I'm gone. Then it makes sense that he would go through this whole thing and think that it's his origin when it's not. So
Yeah.
I think that works. It
It's
calms me a
it's
little bit.
consistent. Yeah, it's consistent with stuff that he's done in other comics. So it didn't throw me that much. Um I don't think it really alters the accuracy of it a whole lot because I
Ah.
don't know. I pretty much take his aide Boris or whatever. I pretty much take him at his
Mm-hmm.
word that he's like, no, this is so like the master that it's almost indistinguishable from him, you know. And yeah,
Sure.
that was a character that was with them. He was with the tribe and kind of like an auxiliary character throughout the stories, but then at the end he's with the interviewer getting the information.
Yeah.
So.
You want to talk about the art a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. I did think you talked about it already, but having Doom present in his own flashbacks, I think was actually kind of a good thing for the artist to do to actually show him there, sort of walking
Mm-hmm.
through his own memories, kind of like a Christmas Carol when the ghosts visit him and he's like walking through his
Yeah.
own memories with them and that kind of thing. Like that, I think that storytelling device as a visual works really well.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was done really sort of grounded. I felt like your complaint that you wanted a little more pizzazz, or maybe just comment as far as like the magic side of things. I think that's really the only downside to the art that Pablo Romandi was doing is that it felt so grounded and like they were trying to make it look so realistic and like sort of real world stuff that happened that the more fantastical stuff didn't stand out as much either. Even the design of the demon was kind of like, well, he looks like just a guy that's really big and then he has horns,
Mm-hmm.
on his back, but it wasn't anything like really wild or crazy. So I don't know if I like that or not. I honestly would have liked to see more enchantments and stuff on the armor too. So
Yeah.
But I noted that like there was a lot of heavy shadow, and the color palette for the whole thing was a little bit more muted than what you would normally see for a superhero comic book, and I think that was a good fit to kind of like we're in Latveria and it's cold and we don't have a lot, and to kind of set that stage of like it's not going to be like big bright vibrant colors for the
Hmm.
whole thing. So I
Well,
thought overall it served well.
so do you think the art style, when you say it's
Yeah.
grounded, heavy
Hmm.
shadows, muted colors, do you think that that was on purpose throughout the whole thing to reflect Doom's personality?
Oh
So
yeah,
like there's
100%.
no
Yeah.
vibrant colors because there's no vibrant colors for him.
Mm.
There's no feeling, there's no emotion, there's only doom. And so it's kind of like, hearing you describe it, I'm like, yeah, I noticed it that way, but then I was like, well,
Hmm.
maybe that was intentional because that's Doom. Like Doom is not colorful and bright. He is very, heavy shadow, a lot of black, muted
Hmm.
color palette because everything just kind of exists for him and it's not, he
Right.
doesn't enjoy things in an emotional way because it's
Right.
very cold. So,
He doesn't see a flower and go, "Ah, this is such a beautiful
yeah.
scent," and go frolicking through the glen. Um,
He sees a flower and he goes, okay, so this particular flower is what you put in this brew if you want to do some shape shifting and
yes.
make yourself look like somebody else. That's, in a magical recipe. That's what this flower is for. Oh, but it smells nice.
Well, and
I
even the
guess.
colors like on the cover are not. I mean, it's kind of like a painted look
Yeah.
for Doom, but even those are not very bright. They're more kind of like toned down and everything. And yeah, I think that was very intentional. I think he was trying to be like, well, we're inside his head, so we don't want everything to be like all cheerful looking. That wouldn't
Hmm.
really fit the book. So,
Yeah. I think that makes
so
sense.
yeah, yeah, I think it was good.
All right. Well, let's move into final thoughts.
All right.
Comics. Comics.
So this is really interesting. Like I said, when I first kind of started reading it, I was like, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
But as I got into it, it was really just kind of cool to dig into, Doctor Doom and his backstory, but not just like his backstory in a, kind of factual retelling, but actually
Hmm.
like you're sort of living it with him, kind of through the flashbacks and then through the commentary where he's there. It's like he's taking you on a personal journey of his autobiography, again,
Right.
on his terms, in his wording, but we get some, kind of backup for that of like eyewitness accounts of people going, yeah, I saw that guy. He sounded like a freight train just coming through, stuff like that. Because, when you interview people, somebody's got to say it sounded like a
Sure.
freight train. So that was really neat. I thought from like a storytelling perspective, the way that they told the story and the
Hmm.
story itself were really excellent. So, that's like high marks for like you can have a really good story and tell it poorly, or you can have a
Yeah.
really crappy story and tell it really well. But this I felt like they kind of nailed both where it was like, yeah, it was a good story. It was a good villain origin story, but it was also
Hmm.
like told really well. And that's why in the synopsis, like I was trying to make it like an audiobook or something, just like reading it theatrically because I felt like that's what this comic deserved. Is it
Oh
didn't
yeah.
just deserve to be a recitation of facts or here's a synopsis. Doom goes here and kills this guy and does this. Now he's evil. He falls into some chemicals. Now he's covered in metal, something like that. But like to really get the essence of Victor Von Doom.
Sure.
Um, so really, there's nothing that I didn't like about this that I would
Hmm.
like take points away from. Like I said, the ending I felt like was a little bit in flux, but after talking through it, it seems like it makes a lot more sense. And it's an
Yeah.
origin story, so you have to leave things open ended because there's going to be like a bajillion stories that are going to take place after this because it's the origin.
Hmm.
So and it didn't feel like a cookie cutter stale origin story either. It felt very fresh, very specific to him. So I really have no complaints, but it's not like going to go on my shelf as like the greatest comics of all time because it's an
Right.
origin story.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. Giving a 5 out of 5 to an origin story seems like that would be really kind of weird and difficult.
Right.
So
Right.
I think I'm going to go for like a 4.25 where I'm going to say, you know what,
Okay.
this is really good. There's definitely, some excellence to it and it's a really good read and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think I'm at a 4.5. I'm not giving it a 5, honestly, just based on there were a couple parts that I felt he exposited a little too much and it started to drag a little bit, but then it would kind of pick up again when we got to the next set piece or whatever. Um, some of his time, so when he was sort of between college and going back and getting his magical training, where he was just like living in his apartment alone and trying to be off the grid, and then the like it was the Russians or the whoever sent people to sort of track him down. That part just slowed the story down a little bit for me. I could have done without it, or maybe moved through it a little bit quicker, but
Yeah.
I'm really like picking to find any kind of negative thing to say about it. So yeah, it's a 4.5 for me. I'm not gonna give it a 5 out of 5 just because again, it's not something that I would put on my shelf and go, this is like an all-time classic that every comic book reader should read. But it is definitely something that if you're into Fantastic Four, if you're into Doom, you kind of have to read this. Like it's
Yeah.
very integral to understanding the character and understanding part of that world that they exist in. So
Well, and even
yeah,
if you're not familiar with the character, or especially if
yeah,
you're not familiar
yeah,
with the
that's
character,
true.
this is a great way to read a good comic book that gives you a lot of information about a character that you may not know a lot about. So if you're Doom curious about Doctor Doom,
Well, and it's
but
standalone too. You don't need to
yeah,
know anything coming into this.
right.
So
It's like the whole rivalry with Reed,
mhm.
rivalry with Reed. I'm trying to say it 5 times fast. Is it's in there. Like you don't have to know who
Mhm.
Reed is. You don't have to know he's Mr. Fantastic. You just have to know that there's this other smart guy. That he's got this like rivalry going on with. So yeah, it it stands alone, and whether
Mhm.
you're somebody that's read, Fantastic Four for years and years and years, or if you're somebody who's never really got into it, both of us agree that it's really good and you should read it. So go do that.
Yeah. Yeah, you totally should. I
Yeah,
one other thing that I thought of while you were talking that I
sure.
forgot to add is there are, if you are a longtime fan, you will get some of those Easter eggs. There are
Of
names that they'll
course.
drop throughout. They dropped Zorba's name at one point, which he's the leader of the anti-Doom resistance in Latveria. And so there was one sentence he goes through where he mentions like these are the people that have challenged me, but they all fell before the sword of doom or what, that kind of thing. And he would rattle off a few names, but if you're a longtime fan, you can go, oh, so Ed Brubaker is addressing some continuity that has actually happened. You don't really need to know any of it. It doesn't really make the story any better or worse, but it's kind of fun if you're already a fan to
Yeah.
have those Easter eggs thrown your way. So
Gives you a little something extra to chew on, some
yeah,
Easter eggs to chew on.
it's almost time too. It's almost
Oh, it
so
is. It is.
perfect time for us to be saying that.
Well, it's also a perfect time to wrap up this episode of We Like Comics because they have no bones. Make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel at Boneless Comics Podcast, where you can watch a video version of this episode and join us for the after show, where we will discuss the writer and penciler from our story today and dive even deeper into the history of Doctor Doom. Doom! Instead of Berserker, now it's Doom!
Doom! Yes, during the after show, we'll also be covering some listener comments from social media and giving a few shout outs. So be sure to share your thoughts on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics
X!
1. But don't say anything negative because Doom does not suffer fools. And use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to let us know what you think. Again, as long as it's positive, of
Yes.
Fantastic Four Books of Doom.
Yes, that's right. Also, make sure you visit our website at bonelesscomicspodcast.com, where you can get additional information about us, your hosts, and a link to our new Printify shop where you can get some of Mike's bandana designs on t-shirts, mugs, and more.
If you like bananas, because they have no bones.
They don't.
Next episode, we are going to be taking a look at Superior Spider-Man Goblin Nation, written by
Spider-Man!
Christos Gage, yes, Thwip, and Dan
Too
Slott,
legit to thwip.
and penciled by Giuseppe Camuncoli and Javier Rodriguez. and published in 2014 by Marvel Comics, so don't miss it.
That's right. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Catch you
Doom
later.
says, get out.
Get out of Doom's castle.
Comics. Comics.
Wait.